I was microwaving leftover chili when the phone yelped that stretched, nasal-toned the city reserves for tornadoes and amber alerts. The screen lit my hand cold blue. Emergency message, remain indoors. Unidentified violent incidents citywide. Curfew begins 8 p.m. Avoid hospitals and transit stops. Lines are overloaded. That was when the microwave light flickered and the bulb over the sink buzzed. And for a second all I heard was the building's old furnace fan groaning through the floorboards. I hit the stove switch with my knuckles, turned the stove clock off, and watched the microwave count down from 10 like it mattered. Then another alert came right over the first one. Same tone, more words, but what stuck was a single sentence. Do not investigate noises. I killed the microwave at 7 with a fingertip because the fan in it sounded suddenly loud as a lawnmower, and I stood in my socks in my small Columbus apartment and decided to act like it was real even though my rent was still due. My left knee was already throbbing from the stairs I'd done at work, and my daughter's weekend bag sat by the door waiting for me to pick her up tomorrow like there would still be a tomorrow. I'm 39, a maintenance tech for a conference hotel that smells like coffee and carpet glue even when the lobby is empty. I do hinges and door closers, ice machines and thermostats, and I have pride I do not always deserve. I also have debt, knee cartilage that complains if I pivot wrong, and a tendency to think I can fix anything with a driver's set and tape. I live on the 3rd floor of a 4-story brick box just south of Greenlawn Cemetery. 2 stairwells, 1 elevator we all pretend works, a ground floor laundry room that steals socks and swallows quarters. My people are few. My daughter Leah, 7, who is with her mother on the north side. My downstairs neighbor Rena, who works nights as a CNA at a rehab center. And my brother Tomas, who left for Kentucky last month to chase a better job and hasn't called since. Ordinary is good. I've worked hard to keep ordinary. I locked the deadbolt and thumb-latched the chain and did the loop I teach myself on nights the wind rattles the fire escape. Peephole clear, door frame proud but not cracked, kitchen window latch snug, bathroom window crank closed until the gasket squeaks, bedroom window jammed with a paint stick, so you have to lift and slide to open it. The hallway was quiet. I went through the drawers for batteries and counted like I was clocking out parts at the hotel shop. 2 flashlights, both AA. One with a cloudy lens and one bright but already warm from use last weekend. 6 AA batteries in a mixed brand pack for AAA that don't fit anything I own anymore. 2 tea light candles in a sandwich bag. A roll of electrical tape. A small pry bar with a nail slot I bought when I moved in. A framing hammer with a split hickory handle I keep meaning to replace. Kitchen inventory without writing it down. 6 cans of soup, 3 of beans, 2 tuna, a box of elbow macaroni, 2 bags of rice, an almost full jar of peanut butter, half a loaf of wheat bread, 4 bottles of water plus tap. My knee brace was under the sink where I left it. I pulled it on and felt that plastic hinge settle, a fake cartilage that still helps. Somewhere down the block someone screamed the way people scream when a dog bolts into the street and a car doesn't brake. I don't like that I know the difference anymore, but I do. I put my ear to the door. The furnace fan kicked off, and the building fell into that breathless quiet of old plaster and neighbors trying to be polite. On cue, the siren started up on Front Street and rolled past like a river. A knock then, 3 hard raps on my door, then softer finger taps like the person was adjusting their glove. I checked the peephole and caught Rena's eye. She had her hair in a tight bun, scrubs under a hoodie, backpack high on both shoulders, keys gripped between fingers like claws. I opened the door on the chain. "Your phone," she whispered, and I handed it through and watched her read and watched her face drain. "What are we doing?" she said. "Inside," I said. "Lights off. Fan off." I unhooked the chain and pulled her in and latched us back up. She shrugged out of the backpack and put it on the sofa like it was a person. "I need to call Grace," she said, meaning her aunt who watches her little boy on her shifts. The phone lines did that thing where they fail quietly. She tried 3 times before giving me the phone back and leaning both hands on the back of the kitchen chair. "My place doesn't have a deadbolt," she said, "and the balcony door won't catch." "We'll fix the catch tomorrow," I said. The words came out stupid and automatic, and I hated the way she nodded like she wanted to believe them. I turned the thermostat to off and stood very still. Downstairs, a washing machine thumped, then kept thumping long past when the cycle should have quit, and then stopped with a clunk like someone pulled the plug. The emergency tone came again, but this one was from outside, a municipal siren that quavered once and died, and I could swear I felt it through the floor rather than heard it in my ears. I went to the fuse box and looked at the labels I'd written in Sharpie. Main breaker, stove, bedroom, living room. I started to say, "We should," when the stairwell door on my floor slammed open and a shoe scuffed hard on the hall carpet. A man's voice said, "Hey," like he was calling a dog. Then a rumble from below, low and continuous, like the building's heart was beating wrong. The basement furnace fan had kicked back on. The hotel taught me to listen for bearings and belts. The sound in our building was a fat belt slipping on a pulley, long, low, and steady. The hair on my arm stood up. The footsteps in the hall came closer in a shuffling drag that made my knee joint ache in sympathy. I looked through the peephole. A man I didn't know in a torn polo was in front of Mrs. Herrera's door across the hall, fingers at his mouth like a child about to bite his nails, but he wasn't chewing. He was breathing out through his mouth very slowly, lips fluttering, like he was trying to whistle without the sound. His head jerked toward the vent down near the carpet where the furnace sent warm air across the hall. He put his hand on the vent and dragged his knuckles across it as if it was food. He turned his head, and his jaw worked like he was grinding dried beans. He didn't seem to register the overhead light, or the closed doors, or me behind the peephole. He kept placing his hand flat on the vent and then taking it away in a pattern. I felt Rena at my shoulder, not touching me, letting her breath out slow, so I wouldn't mirror her panic. He moved to my door and did that steady, slow exhale again. Then his forehead bumped the wood. No look through the peephole, no quick knock, no shout. He dragged his cheek down the grain like he was trying to feel the studs. I slid the chain off so it wouldn't rattle and put the pry bar behind the sofa leg so it wouldn't show if he looked under the door. He didn't. His head tipped toward the floor again, toward the vent where the furnace hum came strongest, and he crouched and pressed his ear to it and hummed low back at it as if he were answering. "Back," I whispered. We went into the bedroom, and I laid the pry bar on the bedspread and took the hammer in my right and put my left hand on the brace at my knee because I do dumb things when my knee is wrong. The hallway vent kept singing, and the man across the threshold kept answering very softly, and then a second pair of feet scuffed 3 doors down, faster, that ugly heel-toe slide of someone with a bad ankle, and that one beeline for where the vent noise was strongest too. Not the light, not the smell of our dinner, not the memory of a door they lived behind once. The hum. It took a stupid amount of time for that to become a thought, and not just a sensation, but when it did, it took a second thought with it, and the second thought made me move. I went to the breaker box and flipped the main to off. The apartment died. The furnace fan fell away like a plane dropping through cloud. The hall outside went immediately quiet except for the 2 pairs of feet, which stopped, turned, and shuffled in a slow seeking circle the way people move when a phone call drops and they haven't yet remembered to say hello again. Rena whispered, "Mark," but not like a question. I let it ride. I cracked the door exactly as far as the latch chain would permit. The man in the torn polo was on his knees, not looking at the door at all. He was looking down the hall toward the stairwell like a dog who's discovered a new smell and forgotten all the old ones. He pressed his fingers to the carpet, not for balance, but as if the carpet itself was a teller of secrets. I heard the laundry room washer below us tick as it cooled because there was nothing else to hear. The man stood and moved away in uneven steps, the second one joining him without any coordination, drawn by something that was no longer in my apartment or Mrs. Herrera's, but in the building's bones somewhere else. They turned the corner toward the stairs without ever checking a door handle or the peephole, not once. I shut the door. I felt clever for half a second, and then the cleverness turned to bile because the furnace fan in the basement wasn't done. Someone else in the building had their own breakers still on, or the blower motor was on a separate circuit. I pictured the old steel cage that half protected the blower and the single light bulb they'd strung above it and the wire run with a junction box that was taped because no one wanted to call an electrician. I pictured both those men and whoever else would come finding that hum in the basement. The sound changed as if the building itself had leaned in to listen. Then Rena's phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. It was all caps, city account, and buried in bureaucratic verbs was the phrase early warning. First signs the apocalypse starts tonight, which would have looked like a prank if not for the breath outside our door and the way two men we didn't know had followed a motor through the wall, like moths to a fridge. I put my forehead on the cool metal of the panel and understood that I had learned something. They were going to move toward steady sound like we move toward a porch light in winter. If the fan was bait, the light switches were a fence. It wasn't an explanation. It was a rule, and rules are something I can use. We needed to choose who we are. I have a daughter across town, and an ex-wife I still care about whether she wants me to or not, and a neighbor in my living room chewing the inside of her cheek because she can't reach her son or her aunt. My normal plan would be to curl small and wait out the night. The rule I just learned said they'd collect anywhere the building hummed. That included the elevator motor room, the laundry room, probably even the security light in the parking garage across the street. Waiting would be letting them stack up like cordwood wherever the city still vibrated. I went to the closet and got my steel-toed boots, pulled them over my socks, and winced as my knee barked. I tied the laces double and slid the pry bar into the loop of my belt, where a hammer belongs. The hammer went in my right hand. The second flashlight went in Rena's. "We're going downstairs," I said. "Just to the panel, just to kill the blower motor. You're behind me on the stairs, and we stay against the wall where the handrail is because the echo carries if you're in the center. If they're down there, we back away and keep backing until we're in the apartment, and I put the sofa against the door." "I'm not a fighter," she said, and she said it like she wasn't ashamed, just stating a measurement. "You don't have to be," I said. "You have to walk. Hold the light low. Don't talk near the doors." We opened my door and eased into the hall. We went past Mrs. Herrera's shut door and the blacked-out elevator with its carpeted entry and that little silver bell button that sometimes rings, and I made a mental note to come back with electrical tape and cover it. The stairwell door has a closer that never caught right, and the hinge squeaks if you don't press in when you open it. I pressed in. It didn't squeak. We went down 2 flights. The basement door was propped with a detergent bottle. I wanted to kick it away. I didn't. The room stank of warm dust and old lint. The washing machines were still. 2 of the lids were up as if someone had run out midsort. The dryer drum light was on, and the drum itself made an ugly drag, sound like someone had left a coin stuck between it and the casing. The furnace blower was a dozen feet beyond, around a corner, behind a chain-link cage, with a broken padlock. Something moved behind the machines, with a small scrape. A hand, gray at the fingertips and black under the nails, pressed into the dust and then lifted. The same slow exhale as upstairs, long and steady, the pressure of breath more than the sound, as if the lungs had learned one trick and forgot the rest. The dryer drum turned and the coin made its noise, and the hand moved toward the drum and tapped it with 2 fingers. The head followed, cheek against the side of the dryer, like someone trying to pick up a voicemail by bone conduction. I didn't take a step forward. I just held my breath like a child and watched. A second head rose and pressed to the furnace cage. The first one moved to it. The room wasn't crowded yet. It would be. I stepped back and my boots scuffed dust, and both heads jerked, but not toward me. Toward the drum as it dragged the coin again. I moved my left hand without taking my eyes off them and felt for the wall switch box. My fingers found the plastic of the cover, slid to the screws, slid to the toggle. The light for the bulkhead at the top of the steps was on a different circuit. The room light had gone out when I killed my main. This was just the blower motor. The switch was open. That meant there was a disconnect near the unit, or the switch had been bypassed. I whispered, "It's in the cage," and the word cage echoed once. I thought I felt the slip-knee cartilage in my chest. Both heads shifted so their ears pressed harder to the steel. The first one made a low answering hum in its throat to match the blower motor, and then stopped as if waiting for a response. I moved closer than I promised myself I would. I put the pry bar into my belt, so I could use both hands. It wasn't bravery. It was arithmetic. The lock was broken. The hinge pins were on our side. I pulled the top pin, then the bottom. The cage door sagged, and the top corner scraped the concrete with a noise sharp enough to make my teeth ache. Both heads jerked toward the scrape, moved a fraction, then slid back to the blower because the motor thrummed again, low, insistent, not dramatic, just there. I lifted the cage door with my shoulder and let it down slow so the latch slotted without that telltale ring. Then I reached over the top of the blower and found the old knife switch on the wall. I dropped it. The motor stopped. The room breathed. They froze mid-breath, like men caught yawning at a funeral. Their hands pawed at the cage once, uncomprehending, then fell. They stood with their heads canted in the strangest way, like someone listening for a familiar voice on the far side of a curtain. I wanted to know if we were safe. That is not the same as being safe. I walked backwards, slow. We reached the stairs. Only when we were a full flight up did I let my lungs burn and suck. Behind us, below us, something else thumped against metal as if a third one had found the room. The sound was aimless now, not coordinated. Their rule had been removed. For now. Back in the apartment, I shut the door and dragged the sofa across the entry, and my knee called me every name it knows. I ate half the chili standing up and packed the other half into a clean plastic container and set it in the cold oven in case the power came back, and turned it into a science project. Rena sat with her hands on her knees and watched me move. "You saw how they followed the blower?" she said like a question. "I did," I said. "Steady sound. They like steady sound." "Like a baby," she said with an edge. And then, because she's still a nurse off shift and still a person, she snorted once, a small mean sound that made us both feel better for a second. I tried 3 times to call Leah's mom. Voicemail every time. I texted, "I'm coming in the morning. Stay inside. Tape the door latch. Use the deadbolt." I shouldn't have written "coming in the morning" like I had any say. I wrote it because I am Leah's father, and my pride is faster than my good sense. The city sirens cut in and cut out. A distant substation boomed once like a drop dumpster, and a neighborhood to our east went black. We slept in shifts, not really sleeping. At about 2 in the morning, the lights came back for 6 minutes in a stuttering wave. In that time, I filled every empty bottle in my cabinet with tap water and filled the tub because the hotel taught me to capture a resource when you can. The fan in the microwave did its cheap plastic whine, and I shut the door to muffle it. The building's furnace tried to kick, failed because I'd left the knife switch down, and the noise it made trying was small, but had that steady core to it. And I went and flipped the thermostats all the way to off, and I shut the laundry room door in the basement on the way back from peeing, because the dryer drum light is a small sun, and nothing good is drawn to suns tonight. We left before dawn because dawn is when city people forgive themselves for leaving their homes. I took the hammer, the pry bar, the bright flashlight, and a roll of duct tape. Rena took her backpack, 3 bottles of water, and a folded sheet of aluminum foil for reasons I didn't ask. We tape rags over our mouths, not because of viruses or headlines, but because breath fogs in the chill, and a human plume is a flag if something is watching. I layered on my zip-up hoodie, then my brown work jacket, and shoved a pair of gloves in my back pocket. The plan was to take the stairwell, cross the street to the municipal garage, where my truck lives, drop to the 2nd level, where the exit barrier is always broken, and drive north to Leah. People who survive write simple plans. Complicated ones use you for spare parts. The stairwell had that wet concrete smell it gets in spring storms. Our steps echoed. So we did that stupid ballet, where we placed our feet on the corners of steps to make a smaller sound. On the 2nd floor, the door was jammed halfway open by an overflowing trash can and a pizza box painted with something dark. On the 1st floor, the exit to the lot had been propped with a rubber wedge like someone had taken their dog out. I checked the wedge with my toe and took it with me because doors should close when you want them to. Outside, the air was sharp, the sky a lighter shade of city black, the breeze still. A siren far to the west Dopplered on and stayed on like a yard light. The garage across the street had those sodium lights that buzz like angry bees when they warm, and I hated them. We stood in the shadow of the brick step down and listened. A sedan somewhere up the ramp cranked, and then cranked again. The sound was a long, steady moan. Not human, not alive. Exactly the kind of thing that had drawn the hallwaymen to my door. I raised a hand, palm down, to Rena, and we flattened to the concrete wall and went along the line of parked cars like we were slow water. I peeked around the corner. The driver of the sedan was bent over her wheel. The engine took, and the car made a satisfied purr that leaked through the gap where her hood was crumpled. She pumped a brake, and the lights on the back flashed, and the purr changed pitch. On the far side of the garage, shapes moved out from behind the stair tower. Not quickly, not in a rush. Heads tipped toward the noise like it was food. I could smell oil and aluminum dust and something underneath, sweet and milky and wrong, like milk left in a locker in June. "Hey!" I hissed once and waved my arms. An idiot move, and nothing changed. The shapes didn't swivel toward us. They kept to the line of the concrete pillars and moseyed toward the hum. That made the hair rise on the back of my neck in a good way. Then the driver hit her panic button, and the car's horn did that rising alarm we all ignore in grocery parking lots. And the shapes that had been drifting toward the steady hum went stiff as pointer dogs and then raced in ugly bouncing strides toward the staccato. "No," I mouthed, and I meant it for every choice that got us here. The driver fumbled, and the alarm kept screaming. I jogged low, knee complaining, and came up on her left side and hit the fob in her hand and told her through the rag, "Off." And she nodded like she'd been waiting for a step-by-step. The horn quit. The humming engine remained soft. The shape slowed and resumed that lazy, hunted-seeking drift. We had accidentally found a way to lead them like cattle. Steady bad as bait, jagged bad as a whip. I filed it and hated that I was filing it, because it meant I would need it more than once. We made it to my truck, because I do a dumb thing that paid off. I park on level 2 near the stairs because the elevator in our garage scares me more than stairs scare my knee. The truck is a 16-year-old Tacoma with a cracked windshield and a half tank. I keep a tire iron, a rusted scissor jack, an old road flare, 2 bottles of water, a pair of jumper cables with a cracked clamp, and behind the seat, a clean framing square and a pair of cheap safety glasses in a scratched case. I inventory by feel, and then I inventory out loud, so I don't lie to myself. We got in like we were trying not to wake a sick kid. The keys turned and the engine coughed, and then settled into that satisfyingly boring idle that suddenly felt dangerous. We made it to the exit barrier. Someone had already shunted the arm aside, and there was no attendant. The world outside was not empty so much as paused. We turned right, then left to avoid the smashed box truck under the freeway on-ramp that made the whole bridge hum like a throat. Traffic lights were blinking red, like a dozen metronomes. We rolled through the long yellow mouth of Broad Street, then cut north on 315 with the river of Blacksheet to our left. A police cruiser streaked by southbound, and the Doppler whale carved right through me. I watched the rear view and saw dark shapes move from the median to the shoulder as the cruiser passed, like iron filings sliding toward a magnet, and I felt the rule lock in with the day. I said it out loud to make it solid. Steady hum draws them. Sirens whip them. Engines like ours attract, but not as hard. If we get stuck, turn it off. Coast. "What about the other rule?" Rena said, and I said, "We only get one at a time." And I hated the sound of my own voice because it meant I had already accepted we were going to have to learn more than one. Leah's mom lives near Beechcroft, a neat patio home with a deadbolt that sticks and a smart doorbell that pretends it's a conscience. The drive up Cleveland Avenue looked like a parade that had forgotten why it started. Cars angled wrong in every lane. The big box parking lots were full like a snow day. We cut behind an auto parts store and parked behind a grocery where delivery trucks sleep. The hum of dozens of fridge compressors came through the brick in a not unpleasant way. The problem was it was not unpleasant to me, and we were not the only species with preferences anymore. 2 of them hugged the wall where the compressors vented. They had their palms flat on the grates, and they opened and closed their mouths against the outflow like fish at the window of an aquarium. We stayed far from that wall and moved between parked pallets and a greased dumpster that smelled like pennies. I had the pry bar tucked under my jacket because I didn't want to telegraph intent to the living.
Inside, the grocery was dull and humming and empty in the aisles and loud in the back where they keep the work. Motion sensors made strip lights pop on as we moved, and I ground my teeth every time one did. We went through aisles without talking, taking only what made sense to carry: 4 cans of soup, 2 of pear halves because I keep forgetting Leah likes those, a sleeve of crackers, 2 boxes of pasta, a jar of sauce because I would trade it for something real later, 2 headlamps blister packed like toys, a single pack of AA batteries, a cheap AM/FM radio with an honest-to-God dial, and a gallon of unscented bleach because the water on my mind had been treated in plants with chlorine all my life, and the smell in those plants told me something that my hands hadn't yet caught up to. That last choice came from the part of me that likes hinges and switches and rules. I didn't even know the rule yet. I picked the tool anyway. We took the back hallway with the beige cinder block and the exit signs that don't always lead anywhere. A steel rolling cage full of dog food blocked the path, and I put both hands on the mesh and rolled it slow, foot braced, knees in line like my physical therapist told me once in a room full of bands and fake cheerfulness. Rena held the headlamp above my shoulder, the light covered with her other hand. The compressors boomed once with a cycle change, and something in the depths answered with that breath I was starting to hate. I set the cage against a fire door to wedge it open as a gate and felt clever in that small way again that keeps men alive and also gets them in deeper trouble. We cut past the break room and a small shrine of baby pictures and birthday cakes in cellophane. I stopped in the janitor closet because my hands live there and picked up a pump sprayer bottle labeled Tile Whiten, Sodium Hypochlorite. I sniffed before my nose reminded me not to. It smelled like every YMCA I ever swam in. It smelled like a summer I can't afford and like rules about sanitation that made my daughter's generation lucky. We took it. At the back delivery roll-up, the chain crank was locked, but the person who cut the lock last night had stuck the chain back through for show. I over-undered it and let the slats rattle a finger's width so we could see the alley. Out in the lane, near the grease dumpster, one of them was pressed to a vent where warm air spilled from the grocery compressors. The other was at the far wall where the hardware store had put a line of slow fans to dry the concrete next to the mulch. Both had their faces turned to the machines, and both made that low reply hum in their throats every few seconds like they were agreeing with a sermon. The alley air smelled of fryer oil and exhaust and wet cardboard. I wanted out, so I did a thing I would strain my shoulder on later for. I set the headlamp on the concrete, flipped it on, and slid it with my foot across the alley toward the chain link fence where the wind made a steady thrumming in the metal. The two didn't even twitch for the light. I clicked the headlamp off and on in my hand. No change. Then I set the headlamp right under the slow fan that breathed out constant. The nearest one swiveled at once and shuffled 2 steps and put its palms on the fan grill and spread its fingers till the skin shone in bands. We went the other way. I can't overstate what it does to your body when your brain knows the rule and your muscles act on it and you make the corner in time to hear fingernails drag across galvanized fins instead of your jacket. It feels like the world is still big enough for choices.
We made it to Leah's mom's neighborhood, and the world got smaller. A minivan with the doors open sat sideways across the street. A black garbage bag had blood on it that hadn't had time to run. The kitchen window at the townhome next to hers was broken. The glass outside instead of it like someone had tried to get out and hadn't made it. I wanted to run. My niece said, "You get one sprint. Use it well." I did not knock. Leah's mom didn't like when I do that even on normal days. But normal ended when the blower motor stopped. I keyed in the code I never changed and closed the door behind us and put my shoulder to it while Rena slid the chain. The living room was neat because she is neat. The TV did that default screen-saver thing like it was proud of surviving the night. On the fridge was a note held up by a chip clip shaped like a cat. It said Depot. Red armbands for Food Line. Whistles 2 to 1 is safe. It had the time. 9:10 p.m., and Leah's name twice as if that would keep her intact. I pressed the paper to my forehead like something old. Rena put her hand on my back, right where the knot always is. The transit depot is a 6-bay hub near the tracks with a yard full of buses. In a normal world, it smells like hot rubber and brake dust and cigarettes and soap. In this world, it smells like hope precisely because it has rules and a fence and a roof. I put the note in my pocket and found Leah's inhaler on the counter and check the dose counter out of habit. 26 left. 1 twice a day means 13 days, which is not how life works and also how my brain still calculates. I took the jug of apple juice Leah likes and a can opener because modern cans are kinder than they used to be, and sometimes you still need a lever. I wrote a note with my big stupid block, printing like a schoolboy. I'm going to the depot. I have her inhaler. I put the note on the fridge with the cat clip because routines keep your hands from shaking. On the way to the depot, we saw a handful of people doing the same thing we were, moving like deer, shoulders high, hands at their own throats without knowing it. A man in a suit carried a kid in pajama feet belly down across his arms, the kid's face buried in his shirt, his mouth and nose covered with a dish towel. Twice we heard noises that were not sirens and not engines. One of them was a rail crossing alarm that had decided to ring itself to death. 3 of them stood under the crossing and touched the post and hummed and did not step into the street when cars eased by. I hated them for obeying their rule, which is what made me believe in the rule harder. The depot had a chain-link fence and people outside of it like tickets in a jar that someone had shaken. 2 men with fluorescent tape bands on their sleeves walked along the line, one with a whistle on a lanyard that he did not put to his mouth often. He used his hand for quiet, and the hand worked. Near the gate, a stack of pallets was turned into a table where a woman in a high-vis vest wrote on a clipboard and tied colored ribbons around people's wrists. Food red, water blue, medical white, work passes green. Runners get no kids on runs, she said like she'd said it 100 times to people who wanted to argue. Behind her, the buses were angled nose first like they'd all hit the brakes at once. On the roof of the depot, 2 guys had strung a tarp like a tent fly. A small generator puttered, and the putter made my teeth grind with what I now knew. We went to the table. Alvarez, I said. Leah. 7. Curly hair. Missing front tooth. She would have come with her mom around 9. The woman flipped pages like a magician who doesn't trust you. Inside, she said. Red and white, the kid. Mother volunteered for kitchen shift. Burns on her forearms. Says from work, I didn't press. Indignation is a luxury in a crisis, but I had a flash of it anyway. You don't need to say you didn't press. I bit it down. She slid a red ribbon over my wrist and pulled it snug. The tug was an old thing, carnival and kind, and it could have made me cry. Whistles, she said, and she pursed her lips and made 2 short notes, 1 long. The sound wasn't loud, but it went straight. Safe entry signal. If you hear 3 long and then a staccato, that's fallback to the bus bay. If you hear nothing, you keep your mouth shut. Inside, a guy with a mustache and a scar that looked like a misplaced dimple put a hand on my chest without being a cop and said, No kids on runs. Don't ask. It's the only rule that sticks. Then he smiled like he had to make it so you didn't hit him. The depot had divided itself into zones with colored chalk. Blue pallets for water, red pallets for food. White for medical was a church basement looking table with bandage rolls and a big jug of sanitizer and a nurse with a ponytail who looked like she'd sleep standing if you let her. I wanted her to be Rena so I could go do the next thing without making it a speech. Leah found me first, coming around the nose of a bus like a penny falling out of your pocket and rolling in a lazy circle and coming to rest against your shoe. She pushed her face into my jacket and then into my sternum and then found the sterile spot at my armpit and breathed there because that's how you hide from the world at 7. I didn't pick her up because my knee was lies and because I needed her to keep a habit of walking. I did not show her what I had learned about following hums or answering them. The generator on the roof kept up its polite putter. The men on the roof had their hands on it like they were soothing a horse. A radio squawked every so often with grown-up words. We stayed until noon, and in that time the depot made rules and enforced them like they'd done it before. Quiet hours from 2 to 5 a.m. No kids on runs, no exceptions. Work for extra water. Whistles only, no shouting, no singing. No prayers allowed after dark. Pray in your head. Colored armbands so the gate team can sort drunks from liars, and no one gets cut twice. I like the whistle rule, and I like that they admitted drunks existed. I did not like the generator, and I said so to a woman in a vintage transit jacket who seemed to be in charge. Pruitt, she said, and when I said I worked maintenance, she nodded like she knew how to use me. Talked to Grace on the roof at dusk. We need power for the radio and a few lights when we cut the generator. We need them not to flock to us when we're sleeping. We need a better way. I took Leah's inhaler and showed her the counter and made her say the number. I gave it to her mother and made her say it too. I sat with them between buses and ate crackers and watched the way the men with armbands moved. People in a group make you feel safer because your monkey brain counts heads and agrees that math saves lives. Groups also attract attention. Around for a guy in a leather jacket slipped under the gate with a battery pack on a leash and plugged his e-bike into a strip. People yelled without making sound. Pruitt walked over and pointed to a sign that didn't exist that said NO. The guy shrugged, then plugged a phone charger in anyway, because pride is heavier than rules. 5 minutes later, the fence line along the west side of the yard started to gather them the way cottonwood fluff gathers in the lee of a building. Quietly. Not a rush, not an attack. Just numbers, fingers on the chain. Heads tipped at the fence post, where the generator's steady song vibrated down to ground. Pruitt walked fast, but didn't run, and took the plug in her fist and pulled it, and the man in the jacket made a face like the day had wronged him. At sundown, we cut the generator, she said to me quietly. We've got hand cranks for the radio. We sleep dark. I volunteer to help at dusk because I can see hinge pins and do not freeze in ladders, and because sitting still makes me stupid. Grace was thin as rebar and had a voice like my high school vice principal who didn't hate kids, and she showed me where to set tarps to break the line of sight from the yard to the roof, and how to set a baffle in front of the generator so its hump pointed up instead of out. We were almost done when someone below blew 3 long, and then that staccato Pruitt had described. The roof went still. We crawled to the parapet. 5 of them were at the gate, and more came in a straight smear along the fence line, drawn by the hum like filings to a magnet. It wasn't a stampede. It was worse. It was steady. You could see the math. We cut the generator then, didn't wait for sundown. The depot breathed like my apartment had when the blower motor died. The ones at the gate stopped. They didn't wander off. They just stopped. Heads cocked like the second rule had not reached them yet. People below got quiet the way classrooms do when someone comes in with a folded note. I could smell river air from behind us, and a chemical note under it, sharp and clean. The water treatment plant down by the bend would be moving water regardless of city politics. I knew that plant in the way you know a building you only ever pass. Chlorine, catwalks, the low metal moan of water in a big pipe. We needed power for small things. We needed the hum to be somewhere else. We needed a way to trick a sense we barely understood. I did a stupid, small thing you're not supposed to do. I went to the white table and stole back the bleach sprayer I'd brought from the grocery. Not stole. Reclaimed. That's how I let myself do it. I soaked a rag and wrung it until the liquid hit the floor like milk. I tied the rag around my scarf at my mouth and took another for Rena and one for Leah and her mom. You don't put it against your skin, I said. You dab it and hold it near. I went to the gate with Pruitt and waved a little square of saturated cloth near a hand that had wormed its fingers through the fence. The hand reached for the cloth, stopped, jerked back, then reached for the fence again like a person reaching for a hot pan and pulling back without knowing why. I did it again, and again the hand reached, stopped short, and shook once like a dog shedding water. The body attached to the hand made that slow hum, and then hissed through its nose, and then went back to listening to a sound that no longer existed. I don't like the chemical part of myself, the one that decides the smell of a pool is a tool, but it was there and it was right, and in that instant I believed we had a second rule even if it wasn't strong enough to be a fence. The first rule, they follow steady hum like it's a mother. The second, chlorine stink confuses their seeking and slows their reach. We tested it in the dumb ways we had. A wet rag waved at hands, a mist sprayed through chain link, a white stream from the sprayer aimed in a low fan at the ground, so they had to cross it. Each time the reach slowed. Each time the head tipped and the breath paused, then resumed in that steady exhale that meant the brain was busy with one thing only. I did not brew chemicals or make airs the city would punish if it had time. I used what was already in the plant downriver, and what was in a janitor's closet, and what a maintenance tech can grab without being brave. We moved the hum, Pruitt said at the same time I did. Grace met my eye like she had already decided how much she trusted me, and wasn't going to revisit it tonight. The plant, I said. We can bait them to the plant with a hum and mask ourselves with the smell that lives there anyway. The idea was ugly and good. Ugly because it meant making a place we rely on into bait. Good because the plant is fenced and has catwalks and hedges of pipe that make noise of their own, and because water's sound is steady enough it might draw them harder than a small generator could. We had a map. People act like those come out of nowhere. They don't. They come out of specific hands. We folded a bus route map and circled the depot and the plant and drew 2 lines. One to carry broken radios and small speakers to be set in a chain. One to lead a group with whistles and bleach rags and pry bars, and the key to a small gate I didn't have, but which Pruitt said she could get from a cousin who worked there. The whistles mattered because steady voice is bait and staccato is a whip. We had learned that in the garage. We debated taking kids, and then didn't. No kids on runs. It is a cruel rule and a good one. I let my daughter curl against me once more, and then I put her with her mom, and I left with a pry bar and a hammer, because that's what I had. The run to the plant would have been almost boring if not for the way the city had taught us to be loud. Every traffic light was a potential horn. Every skateboard, every engine, every fan. We moved like ghosts, which is a stupid sentence that means we put our feet down in places we had looked at first. 2 blocks out, someone threw a bottle at a wall, and 3 of them moved toward the sound like men finding a bar they knew. We skirted. At the rail crossing, the alarm bells had finally drained the last of their battery, and the silence there had weight. At the plant the air had that thing it always has, a thin slice of pool and penny and cold blade. The fence was chain link with barbed wire above, but someone had cut an access square and wired it back bad. Pruitt's cousin had either been lazy or kind. I did not ask which. We unwired it and went through and rewired it after us, because doors should close. The catwalks above the settling tanks were steel and rang if you didn't step on the cross braces. We stepped on the cross braces. The plant had a low hum under everything. Not a generator hum, not a siren. Water hums like a throat with a song too low to hear. We made our way along the walkway to the control shed, and the person with the radio placed it on the handrail and turned it to the same station from 3 radios back, and the tiny murmur made a chain. The radios weren't the bait. The bait was the fact that human hands had arranged sound into a line, and anything that follows is going to follow the line. I am not a scientist. I am a man who counts battery life in my head and notices when his pry bar's paint scrapes off to bright metal. It still felt like laying down a wire for an animal we didn't know yet. They came. Not a wall. A slow layering of bodies along the fence, palms to chain link, heads cocked to listen to the hum that was older than we are. Some found the corner where drainpipes sang, and it made them twitch in that way that is nearly joy. We sprayed bleach along the catwalk entry and held rags near our faces, and somewhere in there I realized my throat hurt, and my eyes itched, and I was becoming the kind of person who will use a throat hurt to buy my people a minute. We made it to the intake building and found the control room, so small it was a joke, and we found the throw for the auxiliary pumps, and we didn't touch it because I don't open valves I don't understand in a plant that feeds a city. We turned on a small blower instead, one that did nothing to the water but everything to the soundscape here. The hum deep into a kind of subterranean song, and the bodies at the fence leaned in so far the chain link took a set. We could have left then. We should have. The depot might have had enough darkness to keep till morning, but the radios we'd set in a line were a line we would have to service if we wanted to keep the bait where we put it, and the group with the whistles was due back at the depot, and on the radio someone said, 3 long, staccato, and that meant breach. Our chain had drawn a piece of the neighborhood to the plant, and the piece that didn't like pools and pipes had found us anyway. The truth is people break rules faster than monsters do. Someone at the depot had turned something on because they needed to see their child's face, or they wanted to charge a phone, or they needed to feel human for 5 minutes. I have done worse for less. Now the depot was calling all hands back to the bus bay. I ran wrong. Knee hot, brace biting, breath loud in my own ears. We crossed a catwalk where the chlorine smell was heavier. The steel was wet and cold. A sign said NO unauthorized, and I ignored it the way men ignore signs, and punished the whole world with that. Below us the water in the channel glowed a little with reflected city sky. I heard a whistle, 2 short, 1 long, from the depot, and wanted to believe it meant safe, when I knew it meant something else now. Keep moving quiet and together. At the gate where we had rewired the cut chain link, 2 of them pressed in and reached through and rasped their nails across the wire without looking at us or the fence. Their heads were tipped at the plant's midline hum, like sunflowers to sun. The radios ticked down their battery life like they were counting heartbeats. Pruitt held her hand up flat, a stop sign. We waited while 3 more drifted past the gate like shoppers in a store they couldn't afford. One of them bumped a post and stayed there, face pressed to the steel, exhaling long and slow as if trying to fog a window. We made it out. We unrolled chain link behind us and walked bent past the willow by the maintenance lot and crossed the street in a broken pattern because steady footfalls sound like steady sound. In the distance, a car alarm went off, and then back on as someone searched the fob for the right button, and I swore not at the person, but at the rhythm of it, because the stutter of it made legs at the fence scoop away and run ugly for the street. We reached the depot fence, and the gate guards did that hand signal magic that means living human choices are still being made. Inside was not panic, which is what scares me most. It was order with a crack in it. 3 long, and the staccato had gone out because someone had unrolled a solar panel and then dropped it, and the crack drew 5 to the west fence. And the kid had cried because the whistle codes scared him more than the quiet did. And the quiet is what keeps you alive here. The buses formed a horseshoe open to the gate. People tucked into the horseshoe the way people tuck into booths. Whistles chirped not enough, and then too much. In the near west alley, a man had an e-bike battery on his shoulder and was arguing with a woman in a vest about whether his mother needed the chair charged. He was probably right and absolutely wrong. He took 1 more step, and the battery pack fell from his grip and hit the asphalt and did exactly what batteries do when they want to live. It started beeping at exactly the interval that called dogs from every yard when I was a kid. 3 turned from the fence, heads up, then 4. Their breath went from steady to steady with an edge. The whistle blowers did their short, long, and I wanted to respect it, and I wanted to ignite. We had to move the hum again or cut it, and I couldn't turn the batteries of strangers into a life lesson without making it a death one. I looked to Pruitt and Grace, and they looked to the plant, and the plant gave us an answer no one wanted to accept. The auxiliary pumps could be brought up for a few minutes, enough to deepen the hum to something so satisfying it would pull at a brainstem we didn't share. It would also draw anything within earshot of the river. It would also throw chlorinated air hard enough we could run the block between the depot and the plant inside a smell that confused hands from reaching. It would also be me turning a valve I shouldn't. "Tell me what to do," I said to Pruitt, because I needed to lay the choice somewhere that wasn't my pride. She shook her head once, because command sometimes is just knowing when to let someone else carry the dumb part of hero. "You can do hinges," she said. "Go to a big one." I left Rena at the gate with Leah and her mom and the white table nurse and the whistle blowers, and took 2 people I barely knew who carried a fire axe and a radio, and we ran wrong back to the plant. On the catwalk, the radios we'd set were dimming in tiny lights, a line of candles guttering. The air in the intake shed had that heavy sweet again, and my eyes watered behind my scarf, and I felt a pain in my sternum that wasn't grief yet and wasn't chlorine either. The pain of decisions stacked like plates. I put my hand on the valve wheel for the auxiliary pump and felt the cold of it and the weight, and I thought about what happens downstream when you change a flow, about fish and pipes and people who breathe what you give them, and I thought about my daughter hearing whistle codes and obeying because she is brave, and I am proud, and I pictured the depot with buses and ribbons and rules and a crack in it spreading. The phrase flashed from the first alert like a cheap bumper sticker that had decided to be a prophecy. Early warning. First signs the apocalypse starts tonight. Tonight, not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight meant the hum and the bleach and the small rules would matter now, or not at all. I put both hands on the valve wheel and felt my knee twinge and my grip slip once and seat again. And I looked at the two with me, and they gave me nothing back because they were busy breathing the way children breathe when they're trying not to cry. Down on the perimeter fence, palms slid on chain link and stopped, reached, stopped, reached. I could leave the valve alone and go back and tell them we can't fix it and watch them hold hands and not sleep and hope an e-bike battery doesn't beep again. I could throw the wheel open and let the pump sing and draw every bad head in earshot to this steel honey while a chlorine reek gives my people a corridor to move by. And I could hope the plant doesn't cough, and I don't choke anyone living worse than they're already choking in this city. I could do something in between and worst of all, because in between is where you die in stairwells and alleys. The radios on the catwalk ticked down one more light. In the depot someone blew a short long, and I pictured Leah's hand in her mother's, and I pictured Rena lifting a bleach rag to her mouth, and I pictured Pruitt with her hand flat, and Grace with her tarp baffles, and a man with a battery who was not wrong, just wrong here. I turned the wheel a quarter and felt the pump engage in the bones of the building like a big cat stretching. The hum deepened in a way that makes your molars vibrate. On the fence the palms pressed harder, and the bodies leaned, and the chain link bowed to a curve. I turned it another quarter slow, because sudden changes are whips and constant changes are bait. The air grew cleaner and crueler at once. The two with me put their scarves higher, and one gagged into his sleeve and kept his feet under him because he could count choices too. The hum sang old songs water knows. I couldn't hear the depot over it, not the whistles, not the people. The catwalk trembled slightly, and I kept the wheel steady because sudden is not your friend here. A shadow moved in the door behind us, and for one stupid, animal heartbeat I thought it was help. And then it took 3 steps like a puppet and found the line of the rail with its palm, and that breath came steady out, and it tilted its head toward the deepening tone, and I knew we had pulled a tide as well as a fence. I had a half-turn left if I wanted all the song the pump could sing. I had a tool belt full of nothing, and a pry bar and a hammer, and a knee that was a future I couldn't afford. The rule says hum draws, chlorine confuses, headshots stop. I didn't want to test that third thing on a steel catwalk over water, with a pump making the floor a drum. I wanted to be in my small kitchen with my daughter eating pear halves from a can, and our building silent because I had pulled a knife switch. The figure on the catwalk took one more step, and its foot slid, and it grabbed the rail and hissed, and then crooned that low answer to the pump. Down at the fence the chain links groaned as more bodies leaned. The radios on the handrail guttered, and one died, and then another, and it felt like candles in a church I don't go to. My hand were on the wheel. I had to choose if the hum was the world I wanted the city to hear or the knife, switch I had to drop. I braced my knee against the column, leaned into the wheel, and took a breath through a rag that smelled like every summer pool I could no longer afford. Then I turned,